They got a lock on us. Engine's been hit.
Get us out of here.
I'm losing control.
At CD Projekt RED, we dedicate ourselves to telling immersive stories. Yet with every new project, we set out to make our games bigger, more complex, deeply engaging.
Come on, V. Let's get you home.
Cyberpunk 2077 marries exploration of a vast open world with kinetic combat, story-changing player choices, and robust character development, all to bring you into our vision of the dark future.
You ever feel like the city doesn't give you a choice? You either burn alive in it, or you never existed at all.
The year is 2077. An economic crisis culminating in nuclear conflict has left America in pieces. With most of the continent degenerating into lawless war zones, people from all over have converged on the already overcrowded Night City, one of the world's last great megalopolises. A hub amassing the best in resources and know-how, and home to manufacturers of cutting-edge technologies, Night City continues to offer the promise of a civilized future.
What? No, this isn't happening.
Oh, but it is.
But in the city's streets, a merciless struggle for power rages. Gangs, corporate agents, hustlers, religious cultists, politicians, and all manner of criminals strive to outplay one another. Ordinary people get caught in the crossfire.
Looking for justice in Night City. I seek revenge. Much more feasible here.
In this world, consumed by never-ending conflict, sometimes only an outsider will get the job done.
Elizabeth tells me you have answers for us. I'm all ears.
And that's you, an urban mercenary, a cyber-enhanced gun for hire.
You seem to understand each other. Take this, too.
As a mercenary, you swear no allegiance. You've chosen the outlaw life and trust that your abilities will carry you up Night City's ruthless, underground social ladder.
Heart of Night City. That's it right there.
To thrive as a merc, you need the right combination of gear, skills, and reputation.
Dex had a load to say about you. I hope he wasn't overselling.
With the money you earn, you can turn yourself into a living weapon, buying guns and enhancements in the hundreds. As you roam the city's streets, you gain the experience you need to upgrade abilities and acquire perks. Combine the right skills and gear to create a gunslinger with inhuman reflexes. A stealthy netrunner with command of all surrounding tech. Or practically anyone in between. In Cyberpunk 2077, you steal a prototype biochip that can set you up for life.
Being filthy rich.
When its sealed container is ruptured, the only way to prevent the biochip from failing is to slot it into your head. It turns out it contains the digitized soul of Johnny Silverhand, a dead rocker boy with violence on his mind.
You mean to say there's an actual terrorist in my head, right now?
He's out for revenge. Aims to bring down the megacorp that made the chip.
Do whatever it takes to stop him, defeat him, gut him.
What is in your head can shift the balance of power in Night City. The high and mighty will do anything to lay their hands on it.
Told you I'd end you someday.
The choices you make will shape your story and determine how events unfold.
V, you gotta take him down. That's why we're here.
But not everything in Night City is a matter of life and death. Sometimes it's about style, choosing your look, your ride, your pastime, who's at your side. Choosing how you spend your dirty money. Welcome to the next generation of open-world adventure. Immerse yourself in Cyberpunk 2077.
my name is Alex. I'm here on behalf of Bagogames, doing an interview with the composers behind the soundtrack that will be in Cyberpunk 2077. And with us today we have
Paul Leonard-Morgan with us today.
And we have P.T. over there in Warsaw. Big it up for P.T. Woo! And I'll be Marcin. Hi, I'm Marcin.
I'm a music producer myself in electronic music and industrial. Have been for most of my life. So I have a bit of background in that regard. So this is gonna be interesting. So why don't you introduce yourselves and talk a bit about your backgrounds and what you've done before working on Cyberpunk.
What I've done before Cyberpunk. So I'm Paul Leonard-Morgan. I do soundtracks for games and theatre and film and produce bands and all that kind of stuff. So I've been doing soundtracks like RED and Limitless and goodness knows what. And I've done some games like Dawn of War and Battlefield Hardline. And then, I got a call about Cyberpunk, had a chat with them. So this was about 3.5 years ago. And it was very exciting to have the chat and then kind of dive into a long journey with these guys.
My name is P.T. Adamczyk. I work as an in-house composer at CDPR. I've been in the company since June 2017. I've been working on Cyberpunk since September 2017. Before that, I was doing a lot of things, a lot of ads, commercials, some electronic music. I also did a lot of ghostwriting and stuff like that, music programming.
Okay, cool. What kind of influences did you take with you on the soundtrack? You mentioned 90s stuff, industrial maybe some Frontline Assembly and Prodigy.
Well, I don't think it's so much kind of, when you say influences, it's kind of quite simplistic because it's not so much that, it's a case of starting out trying to create a whole sound for the game. So I think in any project you discuss at the beginning what direction you want to go in, and kind of, but is using it as a basis for a starting point, almost like having a conversation with someone. Do we want it to be futuristic? Do we want it to be retro? Do we want it to be this? And we'd said right from the outset that there are games and there are sounds that have been done before. So everyone goes, oh, Cyberpunk genre, let's do Blade Runner. And whilst I adore Blade Runner, it's kind of been done before, and I think we all agreed that it's a case of, look, certainly you can use synthesizers just as well, because that's what we're doing, and you can make it electronic. But by making it an 80s thing, it's a genre that's been covered so many times, and I think we just wanted to kind of steer clear of that and try and do something which was maybe a bit more unexpected. And I think the energy of the 90s stuff we've spoken about before, but the attitude of the 90s stuff, those kind of raw beats, that raw electronica, it's got more of a harshness to it than I think some of the 80s analog synths had, and I think that's what got us started discussing that kind of vibe, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I second everything Paul said. He said everything beautifully. One thing I just may add to that is exactly as Paul said, the attitude of the 90s also seems kind of fitting for today's music, because I guess by today's standards, like mainstream 90s music is, sort of raw and dangerous compared to what we are presented today in mainstream music, sort of as being music that is rebellious in a way, you know what I mean? Like it all sounds very pretty right now, and sort of the 90s stuff was very dirty, and it seems fitting for Night City.
Yeah. Like I was listening to Caustic Grip by Frontline Assembly, and that's a totally different sound to anything you'll hear today, and much more raw and brutal. And I was just wondering if that's something you maybe took some influence from.
I mean, I'm not aware of that per se. So definitely no influence from that. But I don't know that what you just said is actually really good when you say kind of dangerous about attitude, about harshness. And there does come a time, if I've been on a soundtrack working with an orchestra, for example, or I've been producing a band, then I like to go to the antithesis of that and go and do the opposite. So there's, you can have beautiful orchestral strings and beautiful horns, and then it's like, right, I need to go and listen to some hardcore thrash metal, or I need to go and listen to some raw drums or something. And listening to a lot of 80s stuff, my wife's a big 80s fan, so she's got it on in the house quite a lot. But when I listen to that, it's very cool. Stranger Things soundtracks, whatever else, it's all very cool. But the sounds themselves are quite gentle, even if they're used in a kind of dancey kind of way. And I think what we try to do is kind of use real harsh distortion, real harsh electronica can still be beautiful, but it's taken some of those sounds which create, I don't know, that kind of edginess. So, Night City's a really fucking edgy place. It's really dangerous.
Yeah.
And whilst you can still have style and attitude, you're going down that street. So I think the 80s stuff is just too beautiful. We've got some really harsh processing of sounds in here to get you on the edge of your seat. And I think you just wouldn't have got that with the 80s sounds.
Yeah, I'm like instantly thinking like FM synthesizers and how they sound in the 80s compared to the 90s. In the 90s they got more abrasive, and I think people started using them differently.
Yeah, but very much. I think also this 80s sort of vernacular would work really well for a game that, is let's say a bit more digital and a bit more, in a setting that the technology is really, really high tech. And in Cyberpunk, it's high tech, low life, but the way people use things is very normal. There's nothing, too weird about having cyberware. It's totally normal for everybody. It's like an everyday tool. So that also, I think, played a huge part. And also, if you think about the setting, I mean, we have cyber psychosis in the game. We have heavy body modification. All that stuff sort of informed the stylistic decision.
So it was more like just looking at the game and looking at the setting and figuring out what kind of sound would fit that setting, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we started out, it's a shame Marcin's not on, but Marcin was chatting away to Adam, the creative director, and his vision of it. And so they started discussing, and we always say kind of, you need words. It's almost like 3 or 4 words to describe what a city is, what Night City is, what a place is. It's dangerous, to say it's edgy, it's got attitude. I keep going back to that word, attitude, and it's about the attitude of your look. It's about the choices that you make in the game, and the music's got to fit that. P.T was sending some bass lines over, which are absolutely filthy, and filthy in a good way. It's got such grit to it, and in any other soundtrack, you might have, I don't know, just lots and lots of different sounds creating a specific cue. You might have like 25, 30 different tracks kind of going. And on this, it was about less is more. It's about 6 or 7 tracks, but each of them are so fat from the synthesizers that we've got and the electronica that's going on, the processing that we've done. But any more than that, it almost lessens the impact of the sound. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because each sound is so kind of manufactured, what we've done to it to make each sound so special, that if you add on any more, it's going to lessen the impact of those sounds. As you're going down, you've got this weird atmos going on in the background, which is either done through granular synthesis or modular synths and so on. But if you start putting 3 or 4 more on top of that, it lessens the impact of that one sound. So all of these sounds we spent absolutely ages creating from the ground up. They're not your typical kind of samples. These are stuff which we would struggle to recreate them again because of the synthesizers that we've used.
Yeah, I was definitely reminded of EBM kind of when I was listening to the EP, because the bass lines are very in the front and taking up a lot of space, and there's a lot of focus on them, and I love that. It was very different and unique, and I loved it.
You said all the right things, Alex.
Just one thing to add to what Paul said, because I think basically creating a sound that's unique is about actually reducing your choices and reducing things rather than adding things constantly. And what Paul said about sort of the production element, that we would rather focus on a couple tracks and really tweak them and make them speak the best on speakers. It same goes in a more creative sort of meta level when we think about stuff. We picked instruments carefully because we felt like they could tell the story, and to a certain degree we kind of stick to those for the entirety of the production cycle. And actually, once I got my palette together, I don't know about Paul, but once I got all the instruments, I didn't really bought any other one. I was just trying to explore what's in them and, how to sort of patch them together.
Yeah.
I love that you're using that as an excuse for being tight, PT, and not buying any more equipment.
For being cheap.
So...
No, Alex, he's totally right, though. Like, we spent, about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 months finding that sound at the beginning of this soundtrack. And finding that sound, a lot of people just think, it's just playing, which to an extent it is, but you're creating stuff. But we didn't necessarily write any music during that time. It was more about creating the sounds, trying to find the sonic world of Cyberpunk 2077. And we were sending sounds back and forth. No, those drums sound a little bit dancey, or no, that bass sounds a little bit too dancey, or whatever. And then it was the Atmos stuff that really got us there. I don't know if you can see it. There's a thing there called a mescaline, which is a weird synth. And there's a thing called a Lyra 8, which is that thing. Yeah. And it's just kind of weird and wonderful synths which we started using and then processing those sounds. And suddenly we found that world. So that was pretty cool. And then after that, it becomes an awful lot easier to actually then start writing the music because you already know what colors you're actually using. So then it's like, okay, I want to go and create an energy track. I know what the bass lines are. I want to create an Atmos track. I know where those sounds are coming from. Because suddenly you feel confident about the world that you're in.
Mm. I'm a composer for popular music. Most of my stuff is like very traditional pop music. I've never worked like for a video game. So how is it different producing music for a video game compared to releasing something as a more traditional record?
Well, I think the first thing you need to sort of leave behind you is the sort of song structure and the form of a song, because first of all, you need to adapt your music to the gameplay, and that may mean that you probably will have to write a loopable piece, and someone like Marcin will ask you to write different sections that are looped within that one big loop, and you may need to do a lot of variation on the same stuff to kind of make things interesting. But it's music in the end, right? So you have to write some notes, preferably. But I think the delivery of the music and what someone like, the studio would ask you, basically to have this whole track heavily stamped so we can have, fine control over pretty much every part that you've put in. So probably delivery and form are the biggest differences.
Yeah, I think the delivery thing is mental because you're saying kind of you're a pop composer or popular music composer. I don't know whether our music is going to be popular or not. but I think that the difference between it is that, as P.T. said, music is music, but there's no start, there's no end to it. So you're writing a film soundtrack, every single thing happens at the same time. So I can go back and keep on going to that bit until I've reached a crescendo or someone's pulled out a gun or something like that. Whereas in game music, it's all about loops. It's all about a piece of music which is going to have enough interest as it's going on for a 3-minute loop. It's going to have enough interest that can then go on to another track, but that loop might be going on 4 times, depending on what you're doing in the game. And then depending on what decision you make, then it leads straight onto another piece of music, which can, if you turn left and open that door, a piece of music happens. Turn right and open that door, something else happens, You're getting immersed in that world, and the music's got to be able to kind of go with every single option that you do. So you're talking about BPMs, you're talking about tempos, you're talking about key changes, you're talking about making sure that the melodies don't get cut off in the middle of it before it transitions to the next thing. So all of those things are technical challenges which PT and Marcin have had while they've been putting all the music into the game. Whereas, for like a soundtrack, as I say, I might start a soundtrack by writing a suite of music. So I might write 15 minutes of music just in that world, and then from that I'll pick out some melodies and some tunes just to get me into the mode of that world. Whereas with this, I think the nearest I got to that was Arasaka, where I wrote like a 6 or 7 minute track at the beginning, and it was good because it helped me get into the world of Cyberpunk. And then Marcin was like, well, I like that bass line there. you're not sure about that bit there, that bit's quite good, let's focus on that bit. That you found the world of Arasaka and that. So it's great because you've then got two collaborators to kind of chat away to. But so I think, it's me anyway, having only done kind of 2 or 3 games before, is very different in that sense, that you've got to think of it as a whole. You're not sort of thinking about the highs and lows of one specific track. You're trying to make the atmosphere of your track work in different parts of the world.
Yeah, it sounds very contextual in how you produce music for a video game. Basically, you have to write for every possible situation and mood that the game will provide.
Well, in a more traditional game, that would be the approach, but the way we handled music in Cyberpunk is we basically spotted the whole game like a very, very long movie. So we knew exactly, where we're gonna have music, where we're gonna have score, where we're gonna have diegetic music, and we basically then wrote those assets pretty much knowing what we need. And I think our initial plans were, almost 100% there. I think we've only had to write like 4 more cues that we, didn't foresee when we started, but that's pretty much it. And most other games, like a typical game would basically say, okay, we have 16 levels, we need exploration music and combat music for every level, go. And our game is very much story driven, so it was really important for us to honor the story and write music that fits the story, and that was the prime objective for us.
Score is the main vessel of emotions in both movies and video games, and Cyberpunk 2077 is no different.
It actually took us a long time to find the right color of the music.
Getting that sound together is almost as important as the actual look of the game itself, because the music is really helping you feel this emotional connection to the game.
So one of the main ideas was to take the cyberpunk genre out of the 80s and give it a 90s flair. We took elements from rave, IDM, industrial, and make them fit our narrative purposes.
We've decided that close to 100% of our music would be purely electronic.
That's why we tried to stick to analog synths as much as possible, so it's got a warmth to it.
I'm super proud of the team we've managed to gather for this project.
For me, it was basically my own personal aesthetic matching the aesthetic of the game. When I read the brief, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I can be myself. I can make music, and it comes from an honest place.
I love the fact that the music in this game is so varied. So we have some tracks that are super dirty, super heavy, and then we have some tracks that are very beautiful and ambient. I'm using all kinds of different effects. So it's been great to be able to experiment with the sound and the style.
It's my first time actually doing any drum tracking for a video game. It's been really exciting. It's been a lot of fun.
It's all about making you feel like a perfect killing machine, because that's what you are basically.
Well, I can do that all day long, so you'll just have to tell me what you like and what you don't like.
Cool. Okay. It's not going to sound like one thing, depending on what part of the city you're in.
We basically scored every quest pretty much with custom assets created specifically for that quest.
We ended up having over 7.5 hours of music in Cyberpunk.
Working on Cyberpunk has just been insane. I can seriously say that I've never worked with such a bunch of mad people in my life, and mad brilliant.
The gear that we use comes out of boutique shops, or they are vintage synthesizers like this Polyvox.
I really hope all this effort put into creating this score pays off with satisfying and enjoyable listening and gaming experience.
Night City. What's shaking Night City? Good morning, Night City! Your man, Stan here. Ooh, I love this town. Love it like you might love a mother who popped you out on the steps of an orphanage once and now stops you to ask if you got a smoke for her. And now, a shout out to all the lowlifes over at the Atlantis. Ladies and gents, here's that all-time classic in Night City.
Soundtrack is one of the key elements we use to build believable world. We've invited artists from around the world, incredible talents, incredible musicians, to write and produce songs just for us for this project.
The soundtrack for Cyberpunk is insane. So the soundtrack being all the songs that they've got going on, whether it's on the radio or on the background, all these just amazing bands.
We've got over 150 custom genre-bending tracks, all waiting for you to discover them by yourselves.
You know, the reason I wanted to be a part of Cyberpunk is, well, basically I know The Witcher is super sick, and then I actually got to play a preview of the game, which was fucking incredible.
I've always wanted to do something connected to a video game, so I was pretty excited when this came in, and it was like an instant yes.
I was kind of imagining what it would be like being a character in that game. The person that's a musician in this world and this time has grew up in that space.
This isn't just some fun shit, there's also an intellectual and spiritual history to this world that's been constructed for you, you know?
We want to provide you with the soundtrack to fucking shit up. Like, how could you not want to be a part of that?
Was there any reason you decided to use analog synthesizers and physical gear instead of using software synths for the production?
Yeah, we thought it would make our life so much harder. I think, I mean, P.T. can speak for himself and Marcin, but I think we all spoke at the beginning about wanting to make this score something different, about wanting to achieve sounds which haven't really been used before in a video game. And very easy when you're in the world of soft synths on your computers, just to kind of use preset 101, preset 102, I'll tweak it a little bit, but in essence, it's still your preset, you know? Whereas using these guys, it makes your mind so focused on mucking around literally with the physical knobs on them. So instead of kind of using your mice, I don't know, you need about 20 mice to kind of change all the parameters on your synths or your different kind of mod wheels and your LFOs and your oscillators. I think by actually having the hands-on approach on this, and there's also something quite cyberpunky about it, isn't it? Instead of having this perfect computer world where you can make things beautiful in lines, it's like, right, you know, what's going on in Cyberpunk? You're trying to get electricity from somewhere. You're trying to hack into someone's lines to try and get the electrics out. You know, there's something super imperfect about it. And with all of the sounds that we've created, okay, they're super imperfect, but they're totally weird and wacky, and you know, they merge into one. There's like sudden buzzes that come out of it, and you know, sudden sounds that come in from putting the not arpeggiators, but kind of different clocks going on and stuff. And I think those kind of things you're not going to get from doing in the box because you're playing it quite safe in the box. But these sounds, as I said earlier on, we couldn't recreate them. You're recording it all as audio as you go along, going, right, actually, I really like this as an Atmos pad now, so let's take that, record 3 minutes of it, and then we've chopped that all up. But if you asked me to recreate that sound now, I couldn't, because I couldn't remember where the cables go, and all the LFOs are off at different stages and stuff. So I think it was really to make us push the boundaries and trying to create new sounds.
And I think actually it's, you know, especially for electronic music, it gives you a lot of inspiration working with certain instruments. And I mean, for me, even when I'm writing like acoustic or orchestral music, I always start with the band, because that's how I know what I'm writing for. And I know if I, you know, have a cello and a piano, I'm not gonna be writing something that only sounds cool on a tuba, if you know what I mean. And the same thing applies here. And when you're tasked with writing, you know, 8 hours of music is what we wrote for Cyberpunk, I mean, you have to take inspiration wherever it is. You know, you have to rely on every little bit of inspiration you can get. And these instruments, they provide you with a lot of stuff. And a lot of stuff actually you don't sort of consciously go after. Like you have, you know, a vague idea what they can do, but you know, the surprises are why you get those instruments in the first place, because you're just kind of playing with them and let yourself sort of lose yourself and go on that exploration of sound. So yeah, and also we had a lot of time in the beginning, so we could do that.
But you're saying though about kind of where a sound might take you, and it's totally true. And it's not that soft synths are bad. As I say, I use tons of Arturia gear and all that kind of stuff, which are fucking great. But there's something about, it's like sitting down at a real piano as opposed to a synthesized piano. There's something about it that takes your brain in a different direction than sitting down and playing a sample piano, which sounds beautiful and it's a hell of a lot easier to record. But there's something about being a composer sitting at a piano. So similarly, you sit at a move and you press a key, and it's like that first ding, 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 and you suddenly go off changing, but it takes off, and some of it's shit, but it's the way that it gets your head into it. You don't really get, I don't know, for me, I don't get that excitement by working at the computer. It's great and it's wonderful. I'm always blown away by the technology. But the creative, it takes me back to when I'm producing bands, the creativeness of sitting at those synths and just actually having your hand on a physical knob, it takes it in a different direction.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there is that cyberpunk thing about it, that I think a lot of people are very focused on the future being in phones and in computers and stuff, but when you look at cyberpunk, the genre, everything is very physical and dirty and gritty, and like, I always imagine the cyberpunk future as everything is very physical, and that's just how it is for me, and I totally agree. Using analog synthesizers is like a totally different experience. You get a totally different relationship with the gear that way, and I can totally understand why you did that. So that brings me on to the next question. What synthesizers did you use, and were there any like famous ones? Like from Roland or Moog or Korg?
My Korg 01. I think in actual fact it's completely counter to that. Like, when we say the word synthesizers, it makes you just think, oh, you're sitting there. And yeah, I've used a bit of Roland, I've used a bit of Moog, but in general, it's about sound. So like, I've used, back there, what have I got? I've got the Arturia Matrix Brute. But I've never once used the sound from it alone. I've layered that up. I'm sometimes playing kind of real bass line as well over the top, but that's then going through various kind of effects and through various kind of mods. And when it goes through the methane at the end, it sounds completely different. So again, like the Roland Jupiter 8, it's got some great sounds, and it's really fast, but they're too warm by themselves, so you really got to process them and distort them and muck around with them. Whereas the Moog was really good for sort of getting some atmospheres going. But as I say, like the mescaline, and PT can talk more, but the mescaline was this bit of gear that all three of us had. So all three of us have got different styles, but it was really important to try and keep a coherentness to the actual soundtrack itself. So even though the three of us might be doing tracks for different parts of the game, it shouldn't feel like three separate composers, and I think this distance here really helps because there's a warmth and a weirdness to it that helps all our tracks kind of stick to the same ballpark.
Totally agree with that. I was really looking to synths that had weird interfaces that didn't have normal keyboards. I used a lot of the Electron Digitac for drums, and I really like programming beats with that. I never really did a full track on it. I just programmed some drums or some weird sounds and then record everything to Ableton and further process everything there. I also use something called the LED loop, which is a sequencer and a synth, and it's essentially a wired modular synth because everything is sort of pre-wired. You just change the routing with some knobs, and it's a very weird instrument. It took me probably like 48 hours of using it to really understand the signal flow, and like most of the boutique synthesizers, the manual is shit. It doesn't tell you anything, and also I think it was written in Italian and then translated to English because it didn't make any sense for me, to be honest. From more regular sort of synthesizers, I borrowed from a friend the Jupiter 4, and I couldn't really use that in game. Every time I used it, it sounded like Blade Runner, it sounded too retro, and didn't seem fitting, you know. And also the sort of the programmability of that synthesizer is very limited. Although, let's say the basic sound of it is really fat and cool, there's not a lot you can do to it. You know, the synth engine sort of on it is kind of limited, so it wasn't very interesting to use. But I've used a lot the Moog Grandmother, which is the semi-modular synth, and I did a lot of sort of important cues or important pieces of cues on it, and I think it's a phenomenal monosynth. Other than that, me and Marcin own Soviet polyvoxes, which are, you know, great, although they have some design flaws in them. For instance, the cutoff filter is non-existent, really. I mean, it goes from about 5 o'clock to maybe, I don't know, maybe 7 o'clock, and that's it. And other than that, it's full frequency, nothing's happening to it. But the resonant filter will blow your head off. I mean, it's really, really powerful. And you can tune the resonance quite easily. But yeah, I mean, I think we all liked using synths that were not easy to sync to your DAW. So that way you could start with the sound or start with whatever thing you were doing on the hardware stuff, and let that sort of influence what you do later, rather than, okay, I'm gonna do everything in 80 BPM, so let's sync everything to that 80 BPM. Yes, you know, that's kind of boring. You know.
But I also think there's something about that, isn't there, where it gets you composing almost in reverse. So instead of starting at the synthesizer, it's weird, because my brain and my studio is like, there's like there's my kind of door over there. So you sit down there, and then you go, right, beep, oh, there's the BPM, let's 90 BPM, and then you go to all your gear over here and start trying to get that in sequence. And doing it in reverse, like reverse engineering, it's actually a really cool thing, because again, going back to that whole getting yourself out of a traditional way of composing, it was much more about using outboard gear, creating those sounds, processing those sounds, and I actually do a lot of processing in the box. So you're kind of starting off with these sounds, mucking around with them, and then getting them in there, mucking around with them. And the fact that they're not beautifully at 90 BPM, I think is what gives it that kind of edge. It's like, it's just about locking. But like, you know, remember when we were getting some of those methylene kind of things going, and we're going, well, it's near enough, I'll get 8 bars of that, and it's just got you slightly against it. But I think it's a much more interesting way of working, to try and create that distortion. Since you've got a few different layers of it, and you're saying your filters don't work, people will go, how did you create that cyberpunk sound? It's because it's fucking shit. Stupid thing doesn't work. But I go back to, you know, it's a funny thing, because, you know, as a music producer, you've got to get your brain in a certain point. You know, if it's a band that comes in and it's an acoustic band, then it's all about the sounds of, you know, what acoustic guitar is going on. If it's an electronic duo that comes in, it's about, you know, giving space for those vocals. But as electronic music, it's about giving space for where the kick is. You know, I learned from P.T. about the biggest kicks are in mono. So I used to think, I'll stereo them out, and you're just like, no, bring them in, get it mono underneath. And you know, we always kind of, you know, layer on kind of some sine bases and stuff underneath. But it's about, and it makes it bigger, bizarrely enough. So the production techniques are quite, I'd say EDM, you say IDM, you know, for kind of different things. But all of those things, the production techniques are similar as far as it comes from the dance world. But then your brain's already in that world, and then you go down this vibe of then experimenting with sound. And the experimenting, you know, if I sit down at a piano and play something, I'm basically basing it on whatever the last tune is that I heard, subconsciously or not. And it takes you, there's a Malcolm Gladwell thing where it's like playing 1,000 times to even get to something which is vaguely original. And it's the same with this. You sit down and you start playing, but because you're not actually starting from a preset, you're starting from a waveform, it's a lot easier to get original straight off and then mucking around with those sounds. So it really makes you be creative. So similarly, with what you're talking about, the filters and stuff, I think sometimes being restricted can also make it really good, because then you've got to work with what you've got rather than just, oh, fine, I can do this and I can do that. No, I'm going to sit down with a couple of waveforms and see what I can do with them.
It's kind of cool that you mentioned, like, not using MIDI sync as much, because that's kind of old school. going back to just, recording a little bit and then looping it, and it's not entirely in sync, and it kind of makes you wonder if that's why a lot of older electronic music like Kraftwerk and Jean-Michel Jarre is so good, because they didn't have MIDI. They had to sync everything, like just doing it the old way.
I mean, yeah, they did have a basic clock. So you could always clock into kind of outboard gear into what it was. But I think, again, trying to get that womp, 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 womp kind of thing going on, I don't know, it's just a lot more fun doing it by hand.
Yeah, I totally agree.
P.T, that was your bass line, and womp, 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 what, did you recognize that?
That was all of my bass lines. You only do that.
Did you use any fully modular synths, or was it only semi-modular?
Well, the best thing is a small contained modular system, so I'd say we all use that. But I mean, I haven't gone the route of what they call it, Euro crack right now. I know this is this is a dangerous place to get into. So I'm still a bit reserved when it comes to that, but one day probably will come and I will get into that more. But also, it's seeing those small contained instruments, at least for me, work well with this cyberpunk attitude and basically this whole world, and Night City. When you have to, have the balls to say, yeah, I'm just gonna use this, and this is what I'm gonna use. I mean, I'm not gonna be playing with anything else. I'm not gonna get 28 different modules because I need a reverb like that, and this reverb, and I need 4 sequencers. Like, no, I'm gonna sync everything by ear, and whatever comes out, I'm just gonna work with whatever came out. So I think that restriction also allowed us to, produce this amount of music, because we could spend ages just tweaking things, but at a certain moment in the production process, you just have to start scoring the game and start creating assets. So restricting yourself with recording, let's say, like a sample pack for yourself and then using it, it helps, speed things up.
Also, we've got Richard Devine. I'm pretty sure that people just buy these things for their Instagram posts, and that's it. But no, I mean, the world that he's created of sound, it's because people talk about the music that we've done, but the sounds that he's done, which we've also then taken a lot of that sound design and incorporated in the music as well, that's effing amazing, aren't they? Like, it's just brilliant. And then you actually see his process of creating the sound design stuff. It's wicked. But for me, as I say, like, I go back to this. If you're sitting down at this guy, I mean, literally, you could spend 3 hours trying to work out how to get a bloody sound out of it. You put your fingers on, you go along, but you're never going to get the same thing twice again. So you've got your DAW permanently in record, mucking around with the tuning, mucking around, sending it different frequencies, but it's in real time. So it's suddenly you're sending on with feedback. So the feedback's having that secondary feedback going through, and the same with the metaling and stuff. But stuff like that, it's having that hands-on thing, and there'll be probably, 30 seconds in there where you suddenly got that beautiful sound where the sound's evolving, which actually is quite Blade Runner-y as well, in the sense that that sound has then gone through. But my God, it's beautiful. So to begin with, it's like this horrid distortion, and it suddenly leads to this place of beauty. And going back to Night City, yes, it's dangerous. Yes, there's a lot of... It's a horrid place as far as you get stabbed or killed or mugged or whatever else is going on the entire time. But in all places of brutality, like it gets quite deep, because generally, like, 2020 has just been so utterly shit. But you've always got to look for the beauty in things. I do honestly believe that, and it's the same with sound. You look through all that distortion, and it suddenly just creates this beautiful thing. And so there are places for tenderness, there are places for emotion, and we had Tina Guru on cello and electric cello, and there are some places where you've got this wall of electronica, and then these melodies that come over the top, which are on distorted cello, and sometimes you can't even tell it's cello. But those moments of tenderness, and then you're back into the harshness of Night City. It's almost like giving you a breathing space just to actually have emotion.
Yeah. You're not the only ones on the soundtrack. There's a lot of other artists that I've seen. What do you think about like licensing music, and are there any artists you would have liked to included that aren't on the soundtrack?
The one artist I really wanted to get, and luckily we have a track produced by her, is Sophie. I'm a huge fan of her 2018 album, and I keep forgetting the name of it, so I'm very sorry. But I've been listening to that. That was my most streamed album of 2018, 2019. I absolutely love, the sort of the digital distortion thing that she does, and from my point of view, she's like the top producer right now. So I think that we're really lucky to have her. And when it comes down to other artists, I mean, there are tons of tracks that I like and love. I mean, we have 150 something tracks in the game, so yeah. So I think everyone will find their favorite radio station, and will have a pleasurable listening experience while just driving through Night City.
I want to try it with some opera going on in the background. But I think, you've got to separate it though. I mean, what you're talking about, Alex, is more about the actual soundtrack stuff, whereas we're specifically on the score. So yeah, they've implemented it. But I think, and maybe that's a question for Marcin as far as if you want to send him some stuff written down. But the three of us have focused solely on score, which is the kind of 7.5, 8 hours of original music that we created for it. And then you've got, again, the attitude of, I mean, what did you say? It was 150 tracks you've had made for this game in the soundtrack, which is just bloody insane. So again, the sheer scope of this, I mean, 8 hours of music to score, 150 tracks for soundtrack. It's quite a massive feat.
I look forward to hearing it.
Just 6 more days, man.
Yeah. Are there any plans of releasing the soundtrack on vinyl or cassette or mini disc or any physical format?
Well, the score is going to be included in every copy of the game, and the soundtrack, I think there are plans, but I think Stephanie will be the one to answer this question.
No, the soundtrack is the pre-order has actually gone up for volume 1 and 2 of the vinyl. So it is for sale right now.
So let's close up a bit. What are your thoughts on the game, and how is the music integrating into the game experience?
Well, as I said, we really wanted to be close to V and her story, or his story. So what we wanted to achieve is a kind of almost linear experience in an open world environment. So we basically scored this game, quest after quest after quest, and make sure that we musically cover all the possible branches of story. So there was a lot of custom cues written. There was a lot of custom implementation, and we didn't really want to rely on a system that would basically just play one track after the other and switch to combat every now and then go back to whatever was playing before that. We really wanted a sort of bespoke music for every kind of playthrough. So someone who likes to sneak a lot and do net running will have equally pleasurable experience as someone who just goes full on, with 2 guns or whatever, and basically is a killing machine. So, and also, the game has a lot of replayability in it because you can choose different life paths. So those life paths can also inform the score, and you will experience different music depending on the sort of point of entry into the story. So yeah, 6 more days and you can experience it yourself.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts or anything you want to say before we wrap up?
No, nothing to say other than play it loud and enjoy the game.
Same here. We hope, the 3 years we've spent on that game, that you will basically hear those 3 years of work.
All right. Thank you very much. It was pleasant.
Thanks a lot.
Where'd you even come from? How are we even talking? Gotta get out of here, understand? And I'll kill anyone who gets in my way.
You weren't dreaming, V. Those were memories. You two are connected in a way I can't make head or tail of.
Who? Me and who, Vic?
Silverhand. Johnny Silverhand. Real talk of the town back in my day.
He died, like, forever ago.
You need to say there's an actual terrorist in my head. Right now.
He burned down half the city just to prove he was right. And burned the other half just for fun.
What do you want from me? Destroy Arasaka. I don't even know what that means.
Do whatever it takes to stop him, defeat him, gut him.
He already tried to take over your body. You know, just for a little while.
Hear me, asshole? A bullet to the fucking brain. Get out! Just get the fuck out!
Tell me how to get rid of it. You don't have much time left.
You're a dick, you know? And you're a cunt. Maybe we'll fit together after all.